Hey everybody, how's it going? Hope you're all good. Welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. I am back with another edition. We're going to look back on Arsenal's underwhelming 1-0 victory over Shakhtar Donetsk. Really frustrating performance. Obviously, the result was a good one. You win in the Champions League. You should be pleased with that. You shouldn't take that for granted. I think I said that in my matchday reaction piece over on the Patreon side of the pod yesterday, and I do genuinely feel like that. Like, there's a part of me that wants to go not super negative, but that wants to analyze the performance for what it was. Be critical of the way that we played. Be critical of the sort of lack of edge that we showed at times. But at the same time, when you win in the Champions League, how big can you go on that? And look, we went to Bournemouth the other day and we were really poor. There's no doubt about that. And we ended up losing, which was a really damaging result, I think, in the title challenge, even at this early stage in the campaign. It sounds mad to say, but I really do feel that's the case because it's heaped the pressure on us going into that game against Liverpool at the weekend. But then coming away from the game yesterday, sort of on my ride home, I was sitting there and I was trying to figure out, right, what is the problem? Why are Arsenal so underwhelming at the moment? Why do we lack creativity? Why are we playing this pairing or that pairing? Why aren't we going with the tried and tested partnerships? Why did we try and change it at Bournemouth? Why did we then go back to the kind of 4-4-2 type shape, if you like, against Shakhtar? Why did we look good for the first 15 minutes? But after that, it fell off in terms of our creativity and our movement and all the rest of it. And as much as I came up with 1,000,001 different thoughts in my mind as I was kind of sitting in the car going home, when I arrived home, I just thought to myself, am I overcomplicating this? Like, am I making this into something that it's not? Am I looking too hard when the problem is obvious and it's right there and it's slapped me in the face, which is we're without two of our best players? Any team in world football without their best players would suffer a drop-off. Now, you could argue, of course, that the drop-off has been too big and that we need to do something in order to mitigate that. It shouldn't be a case of a 50% drop-off, for argument's sake, when you lose just two players. But they're two really important players. They're two really key players. And let me be clear, I'm not making excuses for the performance that I saw at Bournemouth at the weekend, and I'm certainly not making excuses for us being as underwhelming as we were at times against the Shakhtar Donetsk side that are decent. You know, they're a handy side. They've got a few talented players. Obviously, they're playing for so much more than just points in the Champions League at the moment. You got that feeling from them. You get that feeling from their supporters. And I understand all that. It's maybe not as straightforward a game as you'd think. But going into the game, we looked at this as an opportunity to make a bit of a statement. We saw this, I think, as an opportunity to show everybody that what happened at Bournemouth was a one-off. And what happened at Bournemouth was something that, we can move past pretty quickly. And we should have moved past already. And look, generally, the outcome of last night's game was a positive one. As I say, you go and win in the Champions League, whoever it's against, you don't take that for granted. You take it, you move on from it. And you should be pleased with that. But I think there's a bit of a deeper analysis going on because of what we saw at Bournemouth. And had Arsenal been convincing at Bournemouth and got the result that we wanted, I think the outlook on this would have been different. It would have been, well, we played 2.5 days later and we've still managed to get all 3 points in the Champions League. Let's praise the resilience of the side rather than being critical of the performance. So it's very funny to me how you can look at the same thing but through completely different lenses and come to very different conclusions. I do want to go over to the live chat very quickly. As you can see, I'm not at home today. I'm not in the studio setup, so it all looks and feels a little bit different. Takes a bit of getting used to, but wanted to bring you the podcast in a timely fashion. Thibaut says, can we wake up from this nightmare, please? Salah's already smiling, thinking about Zinchenko at the weekend. We'll come on to talk about Calafiori and what we think might be the case with his injury in a bit. Can we wake up from this nightmare, though, mate? Feels a little bit strong. Like, we've lost one game. We lost our first away game in 2024 at the weekend. and then we bounced back with a victory. Okay, it wasn't the most convincing performance. Okay, there are issues that we can all clearly see right now. But to say that we're in a bit of a nightmare, I think is a bit strong, to be honest. And this is where I think we need to keep some perspective. And I don't think we can allow ourselves to end up in a situation where we're, again, as I said already, kind of overanalyzing stuff. Dylan says we better pray Saka will be back for Liverpool. Creativity is a problem. Halo says, morning, this feels like trench warfare. Players are falling left, right and centre. But once more, unto the breach. Clark says we'll be 15 points behind City and Liverpool by Christmas. Why is everybody so negative? Alfred says, I waited for the Weri sub, but it wasn't happening. We'll come on to talk about that as well. Clark says, turns out Nelson is better than Sterling. Come on, mate. Like, everybody's so negative. Andrew says, pathetic performance is a better description. No excuses. Arteta has no faith in players. Where was Nathan? Do you mean Weri? Ethan Weri. Look, a lot of people are feeling frustrated at the moment, and I get it. I'm one of them as well. But let's head into the bulk of the pod. Let's try and break this down then as best as we can. I mentioned what my hopes for the game were going into it. We talked about it on the preview pod. An opportunity to show to everybody that what happened at Bournemouth was a bit of a blip. That wasn't the case. We'll start off with Mikel Arteta's team selection. He went strong defensively. He went with Raya, White, Saliba, Gabriel, and Calafiori across the back. I mean, there was a case maybe that you'd rest someone, but I don't think in the Champions League you really want to mess around with your defence too much. Saliba was always going to play because, of course, he's suspended for the weekend's game, which means there's no excuse for him to be left out in the Champions League. The midfield was Partey, Rice as that kind of two, and then we went back to what had worked. Or I say worked because we haven't been massively creative in recent times, but what's helped us get through the period with Martin Odegaard. Okay, so that kind of box midfield where you've got Partey and Rice at the base, and then you've got sort of Havertz and Trossard playing as kind of double false nines, and then you've got your two wingers maintaining the width. So the starting 11 was Raya, White, Saliba, Gabriel, Calafiori, Partey, Rice, Trossard, Jesus, Havertz and Martinelli. And I thought that was the right way to go. Without Martin Odegaard and without a natural left eight, because I still don't think Declan Rice is that, by the way. That's just my personal opinion. It's difficult to play with the 2-8s and do it well. And so playing this way just gives us that little bit more defensive solidity when we're out of possession. And also having Trossard and Havertz combined in the final third has given us good results in the past. So I understand that. And the first 15 minutes of the game I thought was quite positive. I got to be honest, I turned up there not really knowing what we were going to get in terms of the performance, wondering what it was going to look like. And then you get a 15-minute period, I thought, where we were really quick in our tempo. We were buzzing around the front four that I've described of sort of Trossard, Havertz, Trossard, Havertz, Martinelli and Jesus, I beg your pardon. We're buzzing around and we're really, really interchangeable. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the fact that they were swapping positions. There were times where Trossard was going out wide left, right onto the touchline to receive the ball, and Martinelli was darting inside into that vacant space. Havertz was coming over to the right and trying to combine with Gabby Jesus. Jesus would go and field at points. I thought it was really interchangeable, really fluid, and really good to see because we lacked so much of that in the game against Bournemouth. But after around about 15 minutes, it just felt like the level just dropped again. And Mikel Arteta in the post-match press conference talked about tiredness. And I get it, right? We did play a couple of days prior, but you got to be at a higher level than that. You know, you can't afford to turn up and only play for essentially 15, 20 minutes. And at the point where we scored, I felt like we were going through a bit of a lull. Like we did have a couple of half chances. There was that opportunity for Kai Havertz where he threw his head at the ball, really unlucky. I think it was Matt Vienko who made the really, really important clearance at the time. But there was a drop-off after that initial flurry of like real energy and real sort of drive and purpose to our game. And that worries me a little bit, I got to say. Then we get the breakthrough. Martinelli with a bit of luck, but he definitely deserves it because I think in recent times he's worked incredibly hard for us as a defensive force, also as someone going forward and being adventurous as well. He's He's tried to force the issue. His finishing hasn't always been great. We know that, and we learned that the hard way, didn't we? Up at Bournemouth, or down at Bournemouth, I should say, at the weekend. But he's kept going. He's kept pushing. He's kept progressing. He's kept trying. And yesterday he turns up and he gets that shot off and gets a bit of fortune because it takes a small ricochet on its way to the goal. Then it hits the post. Then it comes off the keeper and creeps in. It went down as an own goal, rightly so. But you got to give Gabriel Martinelli immense credit for that. And as I say, he deserved that. He, for me, was Arsenal's best player last night. Thomas Partey was incredible in the first half, but when he had to move to right back as a result of the change made, he didn't look as comfortable, which he never will do because he's not a right fullback. But in that first half in centre midfield, I thought he won every challenge. He stepped out when he needed to. He intercepted brilliantly. All of his passes pretty much were progressive. This is just based on the eye test. I haven't delved into the stats too much, but it felt like Thomas Partey was doing everything right and looked sharp and fit, which is something I haven't always said of Thomas Partey at the start of this season. So that was obviously really pleasing to see. So we get the goal. We go in at half-time. It's 1-0 to the Arsenal. And you're thinking, okay, we've got our noses in front. We had a really strong start, maybe a little bit of a drop-off. You could call it a bit of a wobble. We allowed Shakhtar to create a couple of counter-attacking situations. Thankfully for us, they didn't necessarily have the quality to punish us for the spaces that we left and the turnovers that happened. But you go in at half-time and you think, well, we've come into this off the back of a really unsettling and unnerving defeat. We're in front at half-time. That should take the shackles off. That should lift that weight off the players' shoulders, and they should now be able to go out there and put this game to bed, and hopefully we can make a few changes and we can shake it up and we can give people breathers ahead of that huge game coming up against Liverpool. But the second half, guys, never delivered. We were given a penalty kick thanks to VAR, and it absolutely was a penalty. It was an outstretched arm as the ball was going towards goal. They were right to pull it up. They were right to award the penalty. And obviously with no Saka, no Odegaard on the pitch, it was up to the players on the pitch to decide who was going to take it. Now, I would have loved to have seen Kai Havertz take it. And I'm not just saying that because Leandro Trossard went on to miss it. I'm saying it because Kai Havertz could have been the first player to score in 8 consecutive home games for Arsenal. And that would have been a really nice thing to have on his CV, given sort of all the discourse that was around him when he first came in. So, yeah, I was hoping that he would take it. He didn't. Trossard took it, and it was a really lame penalty. He tried to go down the middle. Keeper dived to his left, but obviously left an outstretched leg and did enough to deny the Belgian, who I want to talk about because generally I thought he had a really rubbish game. Again, he was really poor against Bournemouth. You know, a lot of us were talking about sort of how he was to blame for the Saliba sending off just as much as William Saliba was, if not more. And the more I watch that unfold, the more I think that is definitely the case. Leandro Trossard certainly let us down at the weekend. And, you know, in the first half of this game, he tried to play some ridiculous passes that were never going to come off. He tried to do the unthinkable way too many times. He tried to overcomplicate matters when we were building up. He held onto the ball too long at times. He gave it away. Shaky, dodgy, questionable defensive passes coming left, right and centre from Leandro Trossard. And you're sitting there thinking, what has happened to this guy? And why has his level dropped off so significantly? He's going through a difficult period. He's going through a bad patch. That doesn't mean I don't think Leandro Trossard is a player that we can benefit from in the future. And I think that he is someone that's going to have a big part to play if Arsenal do go on and win something this season, which we're all desperately hoping for. So it's not to go into him and say, like, you know, his value isn't there anymore and that he should be dropped and all the rest of it. But it's quite clear, isn't it, looking from the outside in, that Leandro Trossard is having a really bad time of it at the moment. And, you know, you could make that case of, well, when your players are struggling, you stick with them and you hope that they push through it and they come out the other side, which normally happens with the good players. And I think that will happen with Leandro Trossard. But we don't really have the luxury right now of shaking it up too much either because of the injury problems that we have. We're asking him and Havertz to not only contribute goals, but to be our creative outlet and creative force at the moment because we're without 2 of the most creative players in the side. Bukayo Saka's got, 8 assists already this season? Martin Odegaard might not always be the guy that plays the final pass, but is as good as pre-assist has come in terms of sort of the way we play through him and we build up through him. So, yeah, I don't really want to sit there and say, Trossard's this and Trossard's that, because I think he will come good again. But he is an issue at the moment because the way he's giving the ball away at this moment in time is just terrible. And when you're playing the high line that we do, when you're trying to squeeze teams the way we do, you can't have someone in your team that gives the ball away as loosely and as cheaply as he's doing at the moment. A couple of other players I want to talk about. I've touched on Martinelli. I thought he was great yesterday. Played with a real intensity and a real drive, which was great to see. Partey, I've also mentioned. He's in my notes as someone that I thought was brilliant yesterday. I think we need to have a bit of a discussion and conversation around Gabriel Jesus. I didn't think he was as bad yesterday as what I was reading on social media, sort of after the game and on my way home. I think there was a lot of frustration aimed at him. Look, he's not Bukayo Saka. He's not going to do the same job as Bukayo Saka when playing out from that right-hand side. Also, you got to factor in that he is a right footer, Saka's a left footer, so they're going to approach the ball in a different way. The passes that come naturally to them based on their body shape and positioning are going to be different. And I think you need to factor all of that in when analysing his performance. I thought he was at times very lively, very sharp, won the ball back on a few occasions, showed his dribbling ability, made his way into the box on a few occasions. But again, that end product is just missing. And that's what Bukayo Saka gives you now. That's why he's levelled up so much. Jesus is still struggling with that. And does he need a run of games to build up that rhythm? Maybe. But he's not going to get them at the moment because his performances, when he does get a chance, are not so good that Mikel Arteta's looking at him and saying, you need to be in the team. Whereas like right now, Martinelli is looking really good. And yeah, he was a bit lucky with the goal that he scored yesterday. And yes, he missed the chance at Bournemouth, but you can see that he's on his way back up to the level that we know he's capable of. And so people are positive about him, and he will be one of the first names on the team sheet. Can't really say that about Jesus at the moment. And I do worry because with each passing week, we seem to be having these conversations about him and talking about whether he's finished and whether he's ever going to get back to the level that we saw in the past. And I'm struggling to see it at the moment. I really, really am. Another problem for us was what looked like an injury to Ricardo Calafiori. Looked like a knee problem to me. There's lots of video clips going around on social media with regards to, what it looked like and what the injury might be. You get people that are like online doctors that will tell you, well, it's not this ligament, it's definitely that ligament because of the movement. I'm not going to try and do any of that because the truth is I don't have a clue. But what I will say is the fact that he was allowed to continue and then obviously broke down again should be seen as a positive. The fact that he felt okay to go out on the pitch. If it was something major, he probably wouldn't have done that. But at the same time, I've got sort of PTSD from what happened with Yuri and Timber, where we allowed him to start the second half, and very quickly he went down with what was a serious injury. So we're not out of the woods with Calafiori, and I'm very worried and concerned about it, especially with Liverpool coming up at the weekend. Who's going to play left back? If Timber is available, we need him at centre back. So what do you do at left back? Kivior, Zinchenko? None of those fill you with confidence, given they're going to be playing against Mo Salah. So yeah, lots of concern around him. Mikel Arteta didn't really give anything away in the press conference because he didn't really know anything, I don't think, at that point. On a more positive note, Ben White's change was one that Mikel Arteta made out of fear of going down to 10 men again. This is the level that we're at right now, where we're worried about going down to 10 men every single week. But he was taken off because he was on a booking. And I think probably because with Timber being touch and go for the weekend, there is a real importance to Ben White right now, and his role is massive. And whether he's going to be used at centre back or at right back, we're not sure yet. But we really, really need him. That's true. And I think for that reason, he was right to protect him. Not just from getting a second yellow card and us going down to 10 men, but also because of the fact that he only returned from injury a couple of days ago at Bournemouth, and he's been brought into that game. He's played the whole game, and then he's been started in this one. Obviously factoring the yellow card as well, and I think it was sensible to take him off. I want to give a shout out to David Raya as well, who made a fantastic save late on in the game and then come and claim the cross under really difficult circumstances just to make sure that Shakhtar couldn't find a way back in. So props to him, because it's very difficult, I think, as a goalkeeper when you are not that busy to then sort of click and be in tip-top form. It's not easy to do that. So praise to him for that. The other kind of negative thing, and I don't really want to finish on a negative, but I think I'm going to have to, is Odegaard and Saka. Based on Mikel Arteta's comments, I'm not hopeful that those two are going to be available at the weekend, and I hope that at least Bukayo Saka, would make it. He still might. Mikel Arteta's done this many times before, kept his cards close to his chest, bluffed us, etc., etc. But just based on his comments yesterday, he didn't even say, like, maybe. He didn't even say, like, we're hopeful. He said, at the moment, it's not looking likely, which is a big, big worry. He said that Saka hadn't even trained yet. He did say last week that this week was big for Odegaard in terms of his recovery, but there's been no indication that he's going to be available. There's been no indication that he's going to be ready. So, yeah, we're going to have to sweat for the rest of the week on those two. Okay, just a quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, check us out, patreon.com/The Chronicles of a Gooner. You can get the match day reaction pod that we bring to you. It's a very short piece, about 10-15 minutes normally, but it comes to you within a couple of hours of the full-time whistle, just depending on my media duties, depending on how I'm covering the game, who I'm working for, etc., etc. But your support is really, really much appreciated, and it helps keep the lights on and allows me as a freelancer to spend time on this podcast. And this is my baby. This is what I love doing more than any other job that I do. So, yeah, if you could support, I'd be very appreciative of that. Also, if you're on YouTube, leave us a like, because that really, really does help. And we're really slacking in that department at the moment. Subscribe to the channel if you're new as well. And if you're listening on audio, please do leave us a review too, especially on Apple Podcasts, where we lost a load of reviews when we transferred platform. And so I'm asking everybody to review us. Final thoughts on this one. Underwhelming, but we got the result, and that's what matters. We're in a really strong position in this Champions League phase. I've heard some people saying that we're guaranteed now to be in the round of 16. I haven't checked that. I don't know that that's true. Just thinking about how flexible this table is going to be because of how many teams are playing, and 7 points enough to guarantee that? I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. I did see that on social media, but I wasn't sure at the time I read it, and I haven't gone and looked at that table because, as I told you yesterday, looking at a 36-team league table just hurts my head, so I'm not going to do it. Let's take a couple of questions. Let's take a few of your thoughts from the live chat then while we're here. Aiden says, we don't have to play brilliantly every single game as long as we're able to get the win. The expectations are unrealistic. Just chill. Even the great Real Madrid have a drop-off now and then. Yeah, I agree with that, but I also think that you need to that you need to be honest about what you're seeing, and I think it's great to be positive, and I think that should, wherever possible, be your overriding emotion and overriding attitude towards what we're seeing, because generally the team has been on a great journey in recent years. But that doesn't mean you should be dishonest about what you see. And honestly, it was bad, and it was really bad at Bournemouth. It was bad yesterday, but we got the result. And that's kind of the difference between the Premier League and facing sides, with all due respect, like Shakhtar Donetsk. Someone said in the chat, can't believe someone referred to Shakhtar as a decent side. Mate, they are. They're a Champions League side. There is players in that side. That Eguinaldo, for example. Matt Vienko at the back's a good player. There's a few decent players in that side. Don't disrespect the Champions League side. I think that's a dangerous game to play. And it's all about that Premier League snobbery that at times has bitten clubs in the backside. So I don't want us to fall into that trap. Lots of you have been talking about Nwaneri in the chat. Why didn't he get on? Why didn't he start? And I'm kind of a bit torn on this. I would have used Nwaneri at Bournemouth for much longer than he played. I said that on the post-match show at the time. But the thing with Nwaneri is there is a real want and responsibility, I think, for the club to protect him. He is just 17 years old. And I think at a time where we're struggling, seniority has to take precedent. Like you should be looking at the guy that's 29 that we signed for 35 million in the summer to help us fix the problem before you look at the 17-year-old Ethan Nwaneri. If you're good enough, you're old enough. I get all of that. And I agree with that. And I personally would have used Nwaneri at Bournemouth for longer than we did. And I probably would have given him a game yesterday. In fact, in my preview pod in the morning, I said that I would start him. So I was a bit disappointed not to even see him come off the bench, but the game was so finely poised at that point. Mikel Arteta took a different view on it. And I'm not like outraged by that, but it is something that in theory I kind of disagree with, because what's the point in keeping this kid around if you don't think he's good enough? What's the point in us, from what we're hearing anyway, based on the rumours, working behind the scenes to try and give him a better contract and really show him that he belongs here if we're not going to use him at times of great need? I mean, we're lacking creativity desperately, and one of our creative players, albeit a 17-year-old, is there and available to us, yet we keep dodging the opportunities to use him. So, yeah. I mean, Marino again, I want to touch on him very, very quickly before I go. I mean, I'm underwhelmed at the minute. Just like I was with the performance in general, I was underwhelmed with Marino's contribution again. And I know he needs time, and I know he needs to build up to full fitness, and I know that he's not always playing. And I think, again, I'll say it again, I think his best role is left 8. And again, when he came on yesterday, he was not playing as a left 8. He was playing as part of that 2-man midfield with Declan Rice. So I'm trying to reserve judgment on him. I don't want to go too big on him right now. But I understand why people are looking at him and thinking, not sure about this. And I did have a wobble before we signed him. If you remember, on the pod, I talked at length about him and why, yeah, I thought he'd be a decent acquisition, but there was a very clear price limit for me with regards to what I'd have been willing to spend on him. When he came, I was happy because that thing had just rumbled on so long, and it was clear that we needed a player in that position. Then the injury set him back, and I think he's playing catch-up. But he's got to catch up quickly, and that's the point here, isn't it? That's the problem for us as a team. We need everybody at their best, especially when we're without 2 of our key players. And again, I'll just round up the pod by saying something very similar to what I said at the beginning. We can analyse this and we can analyse that, and we can talk about patterns of play, and we can talk about partnerships and combinations and who should play with who and what the manager should do and when he should make changes and when he should adjust this and adjust that. I do feel like while we're entitled to do all that as fans, and I'm doing it right now, I'm bloody recorded a whole podcast on it, I do think that we may be guilty of slightly overanalyzing this situation when you consider that we are just without 2 of our best players. And I don't think there are many teams in world football who you could take their 2 best players out without them suffering a drop-off. I think, again, as I said at the start, the argument would be that the drop-off shouldn't be this significant, and I get that. It shouldn't be that we're playing at 50%. We should be playing at 70%. We should be playing at 75%. So the drop-off is too big for my liking. But at the same time, are we overanalyzing? We might just be doing that. That's our right as fans. We're entitled to do it. I wouldn't be surprised if in a few weeks we look back on this, when Arsenal click back into gear and we say, yeah, that Odegaard and Saka are back, and there's the difference. There was no point or no need for all that extra analysis that went on, because actually the answer and the reason was obvious. But anyway, I'll leave it there for today. Thank you all so much for joining me. We're going to do some analysis pieces on Arsenal this week. We've got one coming to you guys tomorrow. Then, of course, on Friday, we'll start building up to that big game against Liverpool at the weekend. There's a Patreon piece coming up over the next few days, so make sure you're signed up. Patreon.com/The Chronicles of Aguna for that. That'll be on Ricardo Calafiori, who I've got some interesting thoughts on, having watched him very, very closely over the last few games, and in particular last night in that second half where he was playing right in front of me. So lots and lots to get into with him. That'll be the next Patreon piece, and then the match day reaction will come your way on Sunday evening as well. So loads and loads and loads coming. Sign up, subscribe, all the rest of it. Leave us a like on the YouTube video. We're really slacking in that department. I can't believe there's only that many likes on the board when you consider how many people have been watching live throughout. So like, subscribe, leave us a review, and all the rest of it. And I will see you guys on the next one. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a great day. Goodbye.